Right, welcome everyone at the next multi-network community sync. Today is January 15th, and yeah, let's carry on our discussion on the design for the multi-network. I think Doug wanted to recap stuff on the pod network CNI, but I'm not sure whether he's gonna join on, so I'm gonna push him to the bottom so that we can discuss that definitely, because that's, I think, continuation of discussion from last week. Um, Lionel, you're next.
Yes. So yesterday I discussed with Antonio about the beta requirement for the CAP 4817. So it's about the Russell's claim status for to report the IPs and interface name, etc. Uh, so the two things that we concluded was to have an implementation for it. So as a reference implementation, it would be the CNI driver. So project under Kubernetes 6. And the second idea was to have an implementation of an endpoint controller. So I created a CAP a few months ago about having a generic endpoint controller as part of Kubernetes, but it got rejected. And I think that some other people were interested about that from Cilium, for example. And I think maybe you might be interested in this. So idea is to have a generic endpoint slice controller which could generate endpoint slices based on IPs coming from both IPs, but also from the resource claim IPs or from annotation or whatever. Um,
But
so I will.
I did mention right last time we talked about this is already possible to do, right? At Google already have that with existing
Right.
capabilities, right?
Right, but you were modifying the informer to.
Right.
Uh, yeah, but the
So
idea is.
it's slightly different. So why why I'm calling it out, right? And I think whether you do it through Informer, why is the problem with Informer?
I mean, just it was to me. It's a bit like a hack, I would say, because it's.
Oh, okay. And That's
It,
that's 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 a maybe fair point. The one thing keep in mind, having or maybe otherwise reusing endpoint slash controller, you gain all the stuff that is happening inside of it. And there was a lot of effort put into it to make it what it is. Creating
right.
something that's not it or being disconnected out of it, that thing that I personally would not want to go with, because I still would want to have my own custom endpoint slice controller gain all the blows and whistles that the current endpoint slice controller has. Otherwise, I'm end up catching up all the time with the current one, with the core. That's and this is the trade-off, right, Lionel? The full
Yeah.
flexibility versus just gaining things. I know it's hacky, but it's a small hack, and I gain all the bugs and fixes and features that endpoint slice coming with. There's a new flag in service, I'm getting it. And then any new flag, I just need to change my API to ensure that I include it, maybe that part, but then I don't have to re-implement the whole thing, right?
Mm.
Just a small translation from my API to, if let's say it's not a service anymore, but something else, right? So I think that's the trade-off, and that's why I find that very valuable. Otherwise, maybe so that's my point of view, and maybe that's one.
I
What
understand.
did what did you had in mind for this? And I'm not saying it's a bad idea, because that's a viable thing, but and to be honest with you, I do want to have an endpoint slice controller in this effort that we're doing here, right? I want to have the pod network, and the next stage to have a controller here, because I don't
So
think it can be part of the core. And because if you create a cap for it, I don't think that would fly. The only thing we would have to create there is to identify what sort of how to say that, what sort of changes in core we need to implement that custom or very like custom endpoint slice. That's at least was my thinking. But maybe I'll sorry, I'm talking too much. What
So,
what's the difference? What do you want to achieve? How different it was supposed to be from what I had in
so
mind?
to me, in my mind, it's supposed to be just a fork that enables this controller to be generic. And the idea is to make it generic enough so it can be used by multi-network, so we don't have to implement it in this community, and can uh, uh, we can get enough traction from other communities. For example, Cilium, I think they were interested in this initiative, and having enough traction so it can maybe at some point get into core somehow.
Mm. So getting to core, I don't think that can happen, right? You see why, right? Because who would, they already have it. Why would they include it in the core, right?
Because now we get the resource claim status with the
Resource.
IPs
Oh,
involved.
okay. So you would want to have the endpoint slice. So you would want the existing RSS endpoint slice and kind of respect the resource claim status as well. But keep in mind that status will be used by multi-network only, probably by us here, by this group, right? In terms of like by this effort and this pod network object, right? So anyone deploying that will use it. Or do you see the status on a resource claim being used outside of this effort, this meetings effort?
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I don't really know.
that's
It's
why I was thinking
hard to
that
say.
we that's why I was thinking that yes, definitely I would leverage that status that you're calling out, but then the controller, I'm not sure you can make it, because then it's not generic, right? Then you just aligning it with how we are doing things with multi-networking, right? So I'm not sure how far that can be generic, right?
I had an implementation before.
Mhm.
I can try to retrieve it, but I mean, it was not fully finished. It was just a POC for the cat that I opened
Mhm.
before, and
Is the
to me, generic.
5004, is the
Uh,
5504 this is for the endpoint slice?
it's the 4770, the cap.
477. Okay, that's something else then, sorry. Oh yeah, I was just maybe looking at that. Okay, gotcha. Okay, got it. So yeah, I agree that having that informal translation layer, it's a bit hacky. But then, as I said, right, you leverage all the changes that happens, because at the end of the day, you need all those things, right? You need endpoint slice to be controlled, to be created. You need the states readiness and serving to be controlled, whether the pod is up or down. You have to watch the pods as well, or some other object like resource claim in your case, to get the kind of status of the thing, or maybe still pod because it has the readiness, right, as well. So I'm not sure how generic you can make it, right? I understand where you're getting at, but yeah. But what I'm getting at is this is definitely an effort we want to cover with this group eventually. And I agree with you. Whether and what I'm thinking is we can create a control internally, and then we can see what sort of changes we need to make here to get it working, and then maybe work with the community on whether we can push some of it into core. I think that can be, at least then you have something functional. And I'm not sure how generic it will be though, right? That's the question mark right here. But that's
I
I
mean,
think the endpoint slice. Do you see
the
that?
generic. Yeah, I completely see that, and the generic part is just because it was proposed as part of this cap, and also because some Cilium guys came and say that they were interested into this.
As well. Okay. So I think the first kind of free wheelie from the clutches of core was putting as a separate library. That gives you, that's the first step. This is what we needed to, that was the best, I think, what we work with Rob at that point. who created that thing, on how we can get it and then kind of sort out our problems. So we make it a library, and then we can create our own with some changes here and there, right, to get it so working. I know it's a bit hacky, as you said, but it's working, and it's very, and we don't worry about, you know, any backward compatibilities, anything, right? So just from our internal experience, I'm telling you that part, and then yeah, we'll see how that's gonna go here, right? When we go to kind of modify that and create that.
But yeah, I
So
still think
that,
that
yeah.
tomorrow I will propose it to SIG Network and try to get a repo for that. So I mean, it's an effort that we will not have to do in multi-network because it will be already there. So
Oh, okay, that's perfectly fine still as well, right? If you have bandwidth to do that, yeah, perfect.
yeah,
Yeah, I will be then there. That's good. Okay. What about
yeah,
the so about the requirements? I assume you have the cap. Anything of note you want to call out in the the CNI? This is the no. This is scheduling. This is the requirements. The 4817. This is for the array, exactly, the CNI the array, right?
the 4817 is the resource claim status.
Oh, okay. But that's is that where is that one then? Better requirements. Is there some additional follow up on this?
Oh yeah, yeah. I added the pull request, the last link. This link.
Maybe
So,
what I'm asking is what are the beta when we're gonna reach beta for the status? Is there other changes? Are we pushing some changes additional?
yeah, to reach beta for this feature that the CAP propose, we need
Uh-huh.
the implementation of the CNID driver, and we need the endpoint slice controller.
Oh, that this is for the but the cap is for the resource claim status, right?
Yes, yes.
Oh, and you're trying to link those things with that. Oh, okay. Um, and you say Antonio is on board on that. I assume the DRA piece, the CNI, is just a reference implementation to how to leverage that, right?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay. And that's part of the cap.
Yeah, I added it in in this pull request 5043.
Oh, this. Okay. Gotcha. And what about the endpoint slice? Is that okay here? Okay, let's see what's gonna happen. That's I think you don't. Did you get any pushback on the endpoint slice controller piece?
No, I mean it's with Antonio that we decided this.
Oh, really? Okay.
But this is not the endpoint slice controller of Kubernetes. This is a
Yeah.
separate repo. Yeah.
Yeah. Understand. Okay. Okay. So those are the two. What else is the endpoint slice? Oh, those are the two things that you want to add for that. And you're targeting this for the next release.
Yes. In SIG Network meeting last week, it has been said it should be for 1.33. I'm not sure if I will have enough time, but or if anyone want to contribute, feel free. But yeah, as soon as possible, I would say.
Okay.
If it's fine with the multi-network community.
I don't. Yeah. Think that's fine. And what about anything else on that beta requirements, Lionel?
No, nothing else.
And what about the scheduling? What is that about?
So I looked into scheduling in the array. So I created a pull request for the requirements and what could be done to solve this problem in the CNI driver. So I created a pull request. If I think it's similar requirements or specification has the multi-network cap, but here it's specifically about scheduling and how it can be solved. But I face some issues because of the array and the lack of features. And I'm currently stuck with it, so I'm not able to fix this problem using the current features. Even with the features that are planned, I don't think this would be enough.
But
So
is this picture true that the resource slice is completely on the implementation side, or is there anything required from us as well?
no, I think
Since
it's only on the implementation side. I think
it's fully owned by them, right? It's not something that we need to worry about, right?
right. I think so.
Okay. And so what are the gaps? Just interested.
So it's a bit hard to explain. I will take some example, but for now, when you have the resource slice, you enter the devices that are, for example, on your host. For example, you have ETH0 on your host. And now you can, from a resource claim, you can claim this device. So only one resource claim will be able to use this device. And this is a problem, for example, if you use a Mac VLAN, if you have a Mac VLAN with a master interface ETH0, you want to create, I don't know, 100 resource claim pointing to this device. And this is not possible for now. At the same
Out
time,
out of one template?
Right, yeah. Because one template will create several resource claim, right? That will point to the same ETH0 device on this node.
Okay.
And
that's
only one resource claim can claim this device in the resource slice.
Oh, you creating ETH0 as a why would you create ETH0 as a resource in such a way? I understand that. Is there no such a concept of a shared resource, ETH0?
No, not yet.
So then do we have to currently worry about it? Because I assume from your point of view, for Mac VLAN, for any of the virtual interfaces, your limitation is, I'm not sure, number of files you can create or memory. I'm not sure what limits the virtual interfaces, but that, right? So basically,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
almost unlimited. So, and you want to tie it up to the parent interface?
Yeah, I mean, because you want to schedule the resource claim where this master interface is available. So you need this master interface to be existing.
No, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, fair. But then, oh, okay. Yeah, I see that point. I think what you could do, and that's just from top of my head, you could always your driver, your implementation could see, oh, I do have the parent interface as you require it. So I will report the n number of Mac VLANs you can create on it. If I don't find the parent interface, you don't report it. I think that's...
but this is for the easy use case. Let's say we have VXLAN. We have 16 million interfaces. And this is one problem. Another problem could be...
What is that problem? Well, I might be missing it.
Like, the problem could be IPAM, for example. So you need, let's say we solve this problem of Mac VLAN where we can have several claims pointing to the same device. The CNI, you can specify in the CNI config any kind of IPAM. And let's say the IPAM we want to solve the IP exertion problem where a node owns a subnet of a subnet. like a subnet or subnet, I would say, of the cluster subnet, and you want to schedule the pod where the node can allocate IPs for this pod.
Right.
So you need to have some kind of hybrid, or what did I call it? Composition device where you can request or you can consume different resources to create your own device or your own network interface.
So there are two things to go about here, right, Lionel? One thing is what you calling IPAM, and that's rightly so, to tie it up to IPAM, because that's what we did as well. We tied it up to IPAM, and I would say IPAM should be a resource, by the way, not memory or number of files, because that will exhaust first than other things. I forgot about that one, by the way, but that should be your thing to go to. And then there is another aspect though, and that's a global IPAM, because here it's all nice and dandy when it's all per node, which rarely we use. We always, like in Multus, we always are like most of, I think, folks here are very used to whereabouts, which is global IPAM, right? And then there is that aspect, right? So what do you do then? And I think
The global
that
IPAM is solved. There is a field that says this resource slice is for the entire node.
for entire cluster.
Entire cluster, sorry, yes.
Okay, but then how do you limit the number of them you can create, or you don't?
Yeah, for now you don't. Yeah.
Exactly, and this is where your limit then is, I would assume, the length of the subnet or the range. That's again IPAM is the limit. So I think it's a mean out of two items: max pods per node, or the range of IPs, right? Is the mean out of the two values. So you cannot have more pods or resources than the number of pods per node. And then, or you cannot have more pods than the total number of IPs for that global IP, right? So that's one thing. And then you do the same thing for per node. It's just limited for how many IPs you are assigned per node, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think, the easiest way to go about this, Lionel. And this is, again, on implementation side. So I'd recommend doing something like that. And now you brought up IPAM. This is something that I think there was a big pushback in core to include any sort of IPAM configuration in core. So this is where I think we are all on our own. I think there was an effort to push the, I think it's called, I'm not sure how it's called now, cluster config or cluster. It was called cluster cider CCC
Service
cluster
side.
cider config. No, service cider is separate. That managed to pushed into. I think it's called cluster cider, but that was pushed back on core, and I think this is now a side project, same like us, that's tried to define IPAM. So I will look into that on how you would define IPAM, because that's what I would eventually want to do as well here, because you want to have means to identify IPAM per network without specifying it in a CNI down below somewhere there, because that's very terrible experience. So what it should be is I have cluster cider config defined a range, and I link into my pod network in some ways, and then the rest is just coming together, right? Instead of, oh, I need to pre-configure this somewhere in the CNI config in a JSON to kind of whereabouts to know about the range. That's very bad. So you don't want to do that. You would want to have a proper user-facing object to define the cider right here as well. So be wary of that. Right now, I don't think you need to worry about that, but keep that's something implementation. When you're at that level, then you should think about that to have that level of configurability. Rather than, okay, go and figure out how JSON works and configure those values down there, right? Because that's, I don't think you want to every user of yours to know how whereabouts configuration works, right? If you were to use whereabouts, I think that's one thing to keep in mind to have something more user friendly. But yeah, but I think for the virtual stuff, I think yeah, you're on the right path to use the IPAM as the kind of the resource limiter, because I think there can be a thing if you have just a large amount of IPs, but I think pods, max pods per node, that will limit you anyway, right? Okay. Anything else, Lionel, on that scheduling?
No, but I mean, if anyone is interested, please read this document. I think it's interesting to understand.
So, and additionally,
programs.
Lionel, you said, because you mentioned that even the future features on DRA will not solve that. What's missing in the future? There was a shared resource, right? They're introducing. Is that, you say, that won't help?
No, I don't think so. To me, we should be able to consume the capacity of the device from the resource claim itself. And from what I read in the CAP, the partitionable devices, it's consuming the capacity from the resource slice from a device to another device. So I would like to first consume this capacity from the request in the resource claim. And I would like also to point to several resources from the one request. So I can point to the host interface and an IPAM and not an IPAM, a subnet or whatever, or multiple interfaces. For example, bonded interface. You need to say, I want this interface to be existing on the node, but also this interface.
I think, wasn't that allowed? I thought that was like the shared was the point of it, right? Because like other approach is I have a PF, right, from which I can or cannot. I could either create Mac VLAN, as you said, or pull it into the pod, let's say, as a DPDK interface. So it will be disappear, as you said, right?
I mean, maybe I misunderstood the CAP, but for me it's only about resource slice, and you can do that in the resource slice, but not in the resource claim.
Yeah, that was in the resource slice. Why? So shouldn't the resource claim define what do you want? So I want the virtual item, right, on the claim.
Yeah, exactly.
But then in the implementation, should that be linked to the physical and say, okay, I am dependent on this PF of it existing. If it's not there on that node, I cannot take the slice, right? Is that not? Maybe I'm missing.
I mean, or maybe I misunderstood, but to me, we should say this request should select this device, and this device. Let's say it's 3 devices, which to me should be called resources, but anyway. And then you can configure your virtual interface based on these 3 resources devices.
But I think the claim should contain only the things that you really want to put into your pod. If I don't want to put the parent interface into the pod, why would I put it in the resource claim?
I agree. The request should actually claim what you want to use, not how it's implemented.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to use the Mac VLAN, and let's say, okay, I want to use the IP. I agree on those 2 items, right? So I call them out in a resource claim. Those are dependent on the parent interface. That's fine, but that should be part of your implementation, not part of me telling you, yeah, I make sure this parent interface is there as well, but you're not pulling it into your pod, right? So why should it be part of the claim?
But then you, okay.
You see that, right?
Maybe I see.
Think of a NAD, network attachment definition. You have all the dependencies in that one if you have that type of CNI.
Yeah, it does call them out.
You don't put it in your pod manifest.
Yeah.
You just refer to the NAD entry.
And that's just that should be the aspect of implementation of what you depend on, right? And this is I think that's why they pushed it on a resource slice to, or what was it? Resource slice? What is it called?
Yes, it's called resource slice. But
yeah, resource slice.
I mean, if you have a bonded interface, it means that in the resource slice you should have all the combination if you want to. like combined to.
I doubt anyone would use Bond interface to anything else than create virtual interfaces on top of it. I'm not sure unless I'm mistaken. I doubt anyone would want to pull Bond interface into a VM. Is that a thing? I would imagine
I'm just trying to get some use cases where.
right, but that is that a real one though with Bond? I would imagine if you have the slaves, those ones, and then your controller creates the bonds, and then it's I agree. Then it's reliant on existence of the PFs, and then
The
you
bond
pull
is
in.
like infrastructure, and then you can create a lot of pods that have a virtual interface on top of that. I agree with that actually. Otherwise, there can only be one.
What do you mean?
If you would take the bond interface into your pod,
right?
Then there can only be one pod that use bond. You want to have the bond part of the infrastructure, and then you create virtual interface for the pods.
Exactly. That's why I'm calling out Bond
Yeah,
0
yeah.
would never be part of something that you would pull into a pod.
No.
I never heard and seen such use cases. Maybe I'm unless someone can call it out that there is such someone is pulling bonds, and I'm talking like in general here, into a pod, but I don't think you would ever do that for Bond. And Lionel, I'm a bit nitpicky about this explicit example, since you brought it up as a corner case, but I don't think that is a corner case, because I don't think anyone would pull Bond into a pod. They would pull. I heard of someone pulling two VFs of the two other ones to create Bond inside the pod, but that's completely different use case, right? You basically pull in VFs into the pod, so that's a different use case. But having that, I wouldn't worry about bonds. I bet about like parent interface that's not a bond. I agree with you, because then the interface might not even exist. Or in other words, maybe you just want to ensure that it's not about a fact of that's a PF that can be pulled in or not, but the fact of existence, right? I have some nodes that don't even have the bond or interface X, right? So I want to exclude those nodes from pulling in the stuff, right? Like today with Multus, let me rephrase that and put on Multus. Multus has a node selector, if I'm not mistaken. So you have to manually say only those. This network attachment will work only on those nodes, right? And instead of you doing this manually, you would want to automate that aspect. I agree on that part, right? But otherwise, I don't think, at least Bond use case and having two interfaces, I don't think you have to worry about that. All right. Anything else, Lionel?
No, got it. Yeah, nothing else on this side, I think.
Doug is not here. I think he wanted to kind of carry on the default pod network CNI. We have 20 minutes. I would like to continue that, because that's something that we did discuss last week. And I would like to kind of take a feel from you all. What do you think about how the default CNI approach should be? And maybe give you some recap. In our initial KEP from last year, our thought was to replace the whole networking in Kubernetes cluster with the multi-networking effort, right? So it's not additional network, it's networks as you would define them wherever. Let's go to cloud, any cloud provider. You have your VPC, you have your subnet, right? And there is no notion of inferred and VPC attached to a VM. There is always a default, yes, but it is created, and it is a VPC, and it's always there, right? And it is pre-created for you. So, and basically this is something I want to kind of replicate here as well, where I come to a cluster and I create a pod, and the pod attaches to, if nothing specified, to the default pod network, right? So same kind of concept. That kind of was my thinking, and I think that was the kind of approach we wrote down in the KEP. I know it's kind of groundbreaking a bit, but I would like to feel any comments here in this meeting. What is the thought of here? Is that something that we don't want, or that not how it should be? Because yeah, Anyone has any opinion on this? No opinions.
Will that affect the installation with kubeadmin and stuff like that? Of course.
I
it will.
assume, right? This is something
Yeah.
that I did called out in CAB that yes, this would complicate that piece, right? And I
Mhm.
think back then what we said is, since it was all in core, we wanted to do changes in the whole thing. What we called out in the CAB that kubelet would say node is not ready until there is a default pod network created
Mhm.
during installation, right? Very simple check, same like you would check for the CNI path existence or status of the CNI, saying it's ready or not. And basically then kubelet will not say the node is ready. Same thing here. I check the API, is there a default pod network? There is, okay, I'm ready, right? If not, then I'm not ready and I don't accept any new pod network related pods, right? It can always do the host network ones still, but this one, no. I'm not sure how that would fly with this not being a core as an add-on. So that's another thing that would have to be somehow solved, which is tricky, right? Because what do you do then? Do you restart the whole nodes or something, remove the CNI, or what do you do then, right? We cannot trick into kubelet's readiness in any ways. We probably could control it through the CNI path as well. So we don't create a CNI path until the default pod network is there or something. That will be tricky because then it means we have to have a some sort of daemon set to do that for us on each node. Not the best thing to have. But yeah, it comes with a bunch of, I assume, problems. I agree. But before we go there on how to solve it, I would like to know and feel, is that the experience we'd want to have, or we don't care? Anyone?
Is it? I mean, what I think is speaking for that solution is that it gets cleaner. It's one way to set up the network. So that's what I like about it. I'm a bit scared of all the implications it might have.
Oh yeah, that's fair. But yeah, that's so I think moving even further step, what will that allow us to do? And why would I want to push for it is I can slice and dice my network, my cluster by networks then. A fully physical isolation, if depending how I implement, of course, the networks, but then I can fully isolate, right? And create sub clusters in a single cluster when you think about it.
Yeah, that's good.
Because then I can have pods assigned to a specific network only, or even say this namespace uses the default network of a completely different type, a different name, right? That was one of the ideas as well at that point where, okay, user doesn't care what network, but then as administrator, I would say this namespace uses network VLAN X, right? And basically that means they all are isolated in VLAN X, and the rest is on something else. Or I do
that I think is a big gain because that would add the security aspect that the Kubernetes doesn't have today. If you can do that,
yeah.
I mean. Yeah.
So that's something that's why I'm kind of being kind of pushing for it, and I would like to have it. I know it's tricky and it's hard, especially this being an add-on to the cluster. So we would have to figure out what does that mean? How do we change it? How do we kind of bootstrap a cluster with this to have that? Those are the things that definitely will be very hard to kind of to swallow. So probably what we'll have to be, we'll have to some sort of a soft and hard approach for this. Software, okay, just an add-on, and your cluster works as is, and you just add interfaces, or you go the hard part where, okay, we take over the whole thing, right? And then that means you have to maybe restart a node and do some other, I don't know, some manual action to get it properly installed, right? Hand waving here a bit, but I think that's where the default pod network idea come in. So yeah, any other opinions?
Is
I
this
don't know. I
something
think
that
Antonio. Yeah, sorry, go. Like,
continue, Machine?
no, it was. If I remember right, Antonio, I forgot his name from Microsoft, was
Michael,
discuss.
Mike,
Yeah,
Michael Zappa.
yeah, exactly. They were discussing this as part of when they presented the KNI, where
Mm.
the limitations, or at least the way CNI being handled. So that could be one approach to really look at those aspects.
Mm.
The other one would be, like you mentioned, soft versus hard, is that one must have to look at whole CNI spec. What will be the evolution of that one to cater for scenarios where multiple CNIs handling different primary interfaces or any type of interfaces and so on. But I need to recheck. I know that Antonio was looking at how things being done. Let's call it Kubernetes networking dependency on the CNI, but it's actually detached in a way. And what will be the evolution of potential new network drivers or network plugins? But I think the idea is good. I mean, it's fair that any type of network, if I don't declare additional ones, or if I need to hook into a specific default because of some security constraint.
Okay.
But that will change a lot, at least what is implemented today.
Yeah. So I think that's the services aspects. I think we have kind of figured out, and there is a path with Lionel's endpoint slice controller, then with gateway API talk. I heard yesterday. I didn't attend it, but I think Pooja is here. She presented an idea of supporting services through gateway API. I think Pooja, you're gonna do it again on the US time base, right, as well?
Yes, that's the plan. I think the next US one is, I want to say, on the 27th one is not there. So on the 3rd of February.
I think we have folks from Europe here as well. So
Okay.
I assume yesterday was recorded, right? Probably.
Yeah, it should be.
So yeah, so I recommend folks to look at that. So this is our first step. Pooja's trying to drive as well to kind of what is possible and how the gateway API looking at service support right through it. And basically then we have at least the services kind of handled. I think the other aspect will be network policies. With this one, I think it's easy and hard. Easy part is that there is no implementation of network policies in core. So it will be boiling down to how the implementation. So that's why it's easy. Maybe the hard way will be that yes, it's all on implementation on how they would do it, right? If someone doing through IP tables, might be tricky, right? To kind of hire distinguish one from the other in such a way. Maybe it's not so hard, but saying that's something that is possible maybe to do. I think that the IP table aspects is more constrained on the services when we use today by default kubeproxy, and that might be kind of tricky to do. But I heard there are some additional kind of blows and whistles today with I think with the NF tables that it is possible to do multi-networking over there as well. So I think I got pulled into some PRs that mentions capabilities to kind of allow that. So there is that. But yeah, that's I think that's that true multi-networking in Kubernetes then definitely has to follow with and kind of is made in mind to get those features in place, right, as well. So yeah. Any other topics? I think we are 10 minutes before end.
Just a question about this what's called endpoint selector. Have you talked to Antonio about this idea? Because we were discussing about it during KubeCon US.
You're referring to endpoints. I think
Is
that's a
that
question for Pooja.
yeah, is that in context? That's in context of the Gateway API, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't specifically spoken with Antonio. No, this the endpoint selector idea came up during our internal discussions regarding Gateway API. Were you at the talk yesterday?
No, I was not there. But
Oh, okay.
I have a talk similar to this idea using services and just the selector of services. And
Ah.
with Antonio during KubeCon, we were discussing about a way to move forward towards this kind of path.
Yeah, because I think as far as Gateway API is concerned, right now the most standard way is to have only service as the backend ref. There have been some extended conformance resources like service imports that people have talked about, but there's nothing else that's generic enough where one could specify a selector and be able to select resources based on that and just directly attach those as the backends. So I think this endpoint selector was in context of that. Are you looking at something specific on that, or did that discussion just come up as a?
No, I mean, I'm looking for the same thing as you proposed. So
Oh,
very
okay,
similar
okay.
things.
But and that's on Gateway API, or are you saying that's as the backends for services?
No, for Gateway API.
Oh, okay, okay, I see. Sorry, I misunderstood when you said services earlier. Okay, yeah, that's cool. I am planning to create a follow-up gap PR now that the discussion has been done. I'll reach out to you, Lionel, for feedback on that PR. That's just going to be a memorandum PR, but then there were suggestions during the discussion that we should likely have a separate PR, a separate GEP PR specifically for endpoint selector. And it'll be nice to get your thoughts there before I went that route of creating the GEP.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. Any other questions? If not, let's call it. Thank everyone. See you next
Thank you.
week.
Thank you for the link.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.